Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today, we're diving into a book that I think will really kind of stay with you.
Yeah,
It's Nassim Nicholas Taleb's The Black Swan.
it's a good one.
Yeah, so before we get into the specifics, I think it's helpful to kind of have a little overview of what the book is about.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's about how unprepared we are for those highly improbable events, what Taleb calls black swans. And one of the main arguments he makes is that humans in general
Yeah.
pretty terrible at predicting things, especially rare events. But we love to come up with explanations after the fact, which makes those events seem less random than they actually were.
Right. Yeah, we try to make sense of it.
Right. And because of this, we tend to focus on what we know, ignoring all the things that we don't, which makes the world seem a lot more predictable than it really is. So are you ready to kind of explore this fascinating and sometimes unsettling world of black swans?
Yeah, let's do it. The Black Swan is definitely one of those books that stays with you long after you've finished it. It really challenges your assumptions about how the world works.
For sure. For sure. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is a black swan event?
Well, Taleb defines it as an event with three key characteristics. It's unpredictable, it has a massive impact, and afterwards we try to come up with explanations that make it seem less random.
Like the examples that he has on the book cover, like Google's unexpected success and the 9/11 attacks. Nobody saw those coming, right? And they had a huge impact on the world.
Exactly. And that third part, the retrospective explanations, that's crucial. Think about how after 9/11, everyone started talking about all the warning signs that were supposedly missed.
Right. It's like we can't accept that something so significant could just happen out of the blue.
Right. And this need for explanations, this is what makes us so vulnerable to future black swans. We create these narratives that give us this false sense of understanding and control.
Yeah, so how does this tendency to explain things after the fact tie into our inability to predict these events in the first place?
Well, Taleb uses a really interesting analogy. It's called the turkey problem. So imagine you're a turkey. You're being fed every single day for months. Based on your experience, you're starting to feel pretty confident that this will continue forever.
Until Thanksgiving rolls around, right?
Exactly. The turkey's logic is perfectly sound, based on its limited experience. But it fails to account for the possibility of a black swan event, Thanksgiving dinner.
So this applies to our own lives as well, right? We make assumptions based on our past experiences, but we're often blind to the possibility of those rare events. That could completely upend our expectations.
Precisely. And this is what Taleb calls the problem of induction. We can't reliably predict the future based solely on past observations.
Yeah, it makes me think about all those times where I assumed things would just continue as they always have. And then you get surprised by, a sudden change of plans or even a major life event, if you ever felt like that, Turkey.
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all been there at some point.
Yeah. So are some areas of life more prone to these black swan events than others?
That's where Taleb's concept of mediocristan and extremistan comes in. He uses these terms to describe two different countries of randomness.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
All right, so mediocristan is the realm of the average. Things are fairly predictable here, and no single event can drastically change the overall picture. Think about things like height and weight. Even if you find someone exceptionally tall or short, it won't significantly alter the average for the entire population.
So it's a world where our traditional statistical models work pretty well.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
And then you have extremistan, the land of black swans. This is where unpredictable events can have massive outsized impacts.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, think about book sales. A single mega bestseller can completely skew the average, making all other data points practically irrelevant. Or consider wealth distribution. A handful of billionaires can hold more wealth than millions of people combined.
So it sounds like trying to apply the rules of mediocristan to extremistan is a recipe for disaster?
That's exactly Taleb's point. We need to recognize that these are fundamentally different realms and approach them with different tools and mindsets.
Okay, so we've talked about the unpredictability of black swans and how they differ from the normal randomness we encounter in our lives. But why are we so susceptible to underestimating their impact?
Well, it goes back to that human need for order and explanation. Taleb calls this the narrative fallacy. It's our tendency to create stories to make sense of events, even if those stories oversimplify or distort reality.
We touched on this earlier with the 9/11 example. But are there other ways this fallacy plays out in our lives?
Yeah, think about how we often judge risk based on anecdotal evidence. Taleb uses the example of a man who gets mugged in Central Park. His friends and family, horrified by the event, conclude that Central Park is dangerous and vow never to go there again.
But of course, thousands of people visit Central Park every day without incident. Those experiences, the silent evidence, get ignored because they don't fit that dramatic narrative.
Exactly. We latch on to those emotionally charged stories, even if they're statistically insignificant, and we let them shape our perception of risk.
So what you're saying is we're all susceptible to this narrative fallacy, and it can actually make us more vulnerable to black swans.
Yes, because it distorts our understanding of the world, making it seem more predictable and controllable than it really is.
So we've got the narrative fallacy. Is there another trap we fall into when trying to make sense of the world?
There's another fascinating concept Taleb calls the ludic fallacy, the mistake of applying the neat, predictable rules of games and models to the messy, unpredictable reality outside those games.
I think I'm starting to see how these fallacies connect to the idea of black swans.
Absolutely. The ludic fallacy makes us assume that the world operates according to a set of clear rules, just like a game of chess. But in reality, things are much more complex and unpredictable.
It's like assuming that because you're good at poker, you can predict the stock market.
Exactly. The rules of the game might be similar, but the real world throws in all sorts of wild cards that you can't account for.
So this brings up another question. If we can't rely on past experience or these neat models, how do we even begin to approach a world where black swans are a reality?
That's where things get really interesting. Taleb doesn't offer any easy answers or foolproof strategies. Instead, he advocates for a fundamental shift in mindset.
All right, let's dig into that mindset shift then. What does it look like?
Well, one key element is acknowledging the limits of our knowledge. We need to be comfortable with not knowing and accept that we can't predict everything.
So instead of trying to figure out what will happen, we should focus on preparing for a wider range of possibilities.
Exactly. It's about building robust systems and strategies that can withstand unexpected shocks, rather than clinging to the illusion of control.
This reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from the book. He says, "Missing a train is only painful if you run after it." Likewise, not matching the idea of success others expect from you is only painful if that's what you are seeking.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it highlights how much of our suffering comes from clinging to expectations and trying to force things to go according to plan. But when we embrace the possibility of the unexpected, we become more resilient and adaptable.
Definitely. So accepting the limits of our knowledge, that's a big part of this mindset shift.
Okay, what else is involved?
Taleb also emphasizes the importance of optionality, having the flexibility to change course and seize opportunities as they arise. It's about not locking yourself into rigid plans.
So keeping your options open and being prepared to pivot when the unexpected happens.
Exactly. It's like having a backup parachute. You might never need it, but it's good to know it's there.
Okay, so we need to acknowledge the limits of our knowledge, embrace optionality, and build systems that can withstand shocks. Any other key principles to keep in mind?
Well, there's this other important concept, the barbell strategy. It's a risk management approach where you combine extreme conservatism with calculated risk-taking.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. How does it work in practice?
So imagine you have your investments. Instead of putting all your eggs in one basket, you allocate a large portion to safe conservative options, like bonds or index funds. Then you take a small portion, and you put it into high-risk, high-reward ventures.
So it's like playing it safe with most of your resources,
Yeah.
but also leaving room for potentially outsized gains.
Yes, exactly. This way you're mitigating your downside risk, while also exposing yourself to the possibility of benefiting from positive black swans.
This idea of a barbell strategy could actually apply to many areas of life, not just finance, like in your career. You might focus on building a solid foundation of skills, while also exploring some unconventional projects or side hustles.
That's a great point. The barbell strategy is really about finding that balance between security and opportunity in a world where both are constantly in flux.
Yeah, this is all incredibly thought-provoking. But I'm starting to wonder, if we can't predict black swans, and we're constantly susceptible to these fallacies, are we just doomed to be at the mercy of random events?
Not necessarily. While we can't control everything, we can certainly influence our outcomes. Taleb's message isn't about giving up or becoming passive. It's about approaching the world with a healthy dose of skepticism, humility, and a willingness to adapt.
So instead of trying to predict and control the future, we should focus on building resilience and preparing for a wider range of possibilities.
Exactly. And this is where things get really exciting. Because when we let go of the illusion of control, we open ourselves up to a world of possibilities that we might never have imagined otherwise.
This reminds me of another one of my favorite passages from the book. He says, "Wind extinguishes a candle and energizes fire." Likewise, with randomness, uncertainty, chaos, you want to use them, not hide from them. You want to be the fire and wish for the wind.
Oh, that's powerful.
Yeah, it really captures the essence of Taleb's message. Instead of fearing the unknown, we should embrace it as a source of opportunity and growth. So how do we practically go about being the fire? What steps can we take to cultivate that kind of resilience and adaptability?
Well, that's a topic for another discussion.
Okay, well, I'm definitely eager to hear more about that in our next segment. But for now, let's take a quick break.
One of the most practical things you can do is to constantly challenge your own assumptions.
So basically question everything.
In a way, yes. Don't just accept the narratives you're given or the predictions you hear. Think critically about the information you're consuming and be willing to consider alternative perspectives.
This reminds me of Taleb's concept of the intellectual yet idiot. Those highly educated people who are often blind to the realities of black swans because they're trapped in their own abstract models and theories.
Exactly. It's a reminder that intelligence and expertise don't always equate to wisdom. Sometimes the people who are most confident in their predictions are the ones who are most likely to be wrong.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap ourselves?
By cultivating intellectual humility, recognizing that we don't have all the answers, and that our understanding of the world is always incomplete.
So being open to the possibility of being wrong.
Absolutely. And being willing to learn from our mistakes. That's another key aspect of building resilience, embracing failure as a learning opportunity.
It's like that saying, every master was once a disaster.
Exactly. We learn and grow the most from our setbacks. It's how we develop the adaptability and resourcefulness. We need to navigate a world of black swans.
Okay, so challenge your assumptions. Cultivate intellectual humility. Embrace failure. Any other practical tips for being the fire?
Taleb also emphasizes the importance of tinkering, a process of trial and error experimentation and continuous learning.
So basically, don't be afraid to try new things and see what happens.
Exactly. In a world of black swans, we can't just rely on past experience or theoretical models. We need to be constantly experimenting, gathering new information, and adapting our strategies based on what we learn.
Took that quote from the book where he says, "The strategy for the discoverers and entrepreneurs is to rely less on top-down planning and focus on maximum tinkering and recognizing opportunities when they present themselves."
That's a great one. It highlights how much of our success depends on being open to the unexpected and being willing to adjust our course as needed.
Yeah, I think some people might hear this and think, okay, so I should just throw all my plans out the window and just wing it.
Not exactly. It's not about abandoning planning altogether, but about recognizing its limitations. Plans are useful as starting points, but they need to be flexible and adaptable. We need to be prepared to deviate from the plan when the situation demands it.
So it's more about having a direction, but being open to changing course along the way.
Exactly. It's like navigating a ship. You have a destination in mind, but you need to be constantly adjusting your sails based on the wind and the currents.
This idea of tinkering and experimentation also makes me think about the importance of diversity, both in terms of our experiences and our perspectives.
That's a great point. The more diverse our experiences and perspectives are, the better equipped we are to handle unexpected situations.
Because we're exposed to a wider range of possibilities and potential solutions.
Exactly. And we're less likely to be blindsided by something that falls outside our narrow field of vision.
So how can we actively cultivate this diversity in our lives?
Well, it starts with being open to new experiences, new ideas, and new people. Step outside your comfort zone, travel to different places, read books outside your usual genres, connect with people from different backgrounds.
So basically be a lifelong learner.
Absolutely. The more we learn and grow, the more resilient and adaptable we become.
This all ties back to Taleb's concept of anti-fragility. The idea that some systems and individuals actually benefit from shocks and stressors.
That's a key concept in the book. Anti-fragility goes beyond resilience. It's not just about bouncing back from setbacks, but actually becoming stronger and more capable as a result of those experiences.
So it's like a muscle that gets stronger with each workout.
Exactly. The more we expose ourselves to challenges and uncertainty, the more anti-fragile we become.
But I think for a lot of people, the idea of embracing uncertainty and even welcoming chaos can feel pretty daunting.
I understand that. It goes against our natural instincts to seek comfort and security. But the reality is that the world is inherently uncertain. And trying to avoid that uncertainty only makes us more fragile in the long run.
So it's better to face the unknown head-on and learn to navigate it.
Exactly. It's about shifting our mindset from one of fear and avoidance to one of curiosity and exploration.
So instead of seeing black swans as threats, we should see them as opportunities for growth and transformation.
Exactly, because it's often in those moments of unexpected disruption that we discover our true strengths and capabilities.
This is all incredibly insightful, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on something specific. Taleb talks a lot about the limitations of traditional approaches to risk management, especially in fields like finance. What are some of the key takeaways from his critique?
One of the biggest problems is that traditional risk models rely heavily on the Gaussian bell curve, also known as the normal distribution. This model assumes a smooth, continuous distribution of outcomes, where extreme events are extremely rare.
But as we've discussed, the world doesn't always work that way. Black swans are those outliers that fall outside the bell curve and can completely disrupt our predictions.
Exactly. And relying on models that ignore these outliers can lead to a false sense of security and a dangerous underestimation of risk.
So what's the alternative? If the bell curve isn't an accurate representation of reality, what model should we be using?
Taleb argues that we need to move beyond traditional statistical models and embrace a more nuanced understanding of randomness. He introduces the concept of Mandelbrottian or fractal randomness, which he believes is a far more accurate representation of the way the world actually works.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this fractal randomness.
Fractal randomness is based on the idea of self-similarity, where patterns repeat themselves at different scales. Think about the coastline of Britain. It looks roughly the same whether you're looking at it from an airplane or through a magnifying glass.
So it's a world of jagged edges and unpredictable fluctuations.
Exactly. And unlike the Gaussian model, which assumes a smooth, continuous distribution, fractal randomness can accommodate those sudden jumps and discontinuities that characterize black swan events.
So it sounds like understanding fractal randomness is crucial for navigating a world where black swans are the norm, not the exception.
That's right. It's about recognizing that the unpredictable is not only possible, but often an inherent feature of the systems we're dealing with.
Okay, so we need to rethink our models of randomness. Are there any other practical implications for how we manage risk in a world of black swans?
Another key takeaway is the importance of stress testing our systems and strategies. This means deliberately exposing them to extreme scenarios to see how they hold up.
So kind of like a trial by fire for our plans and assumptions.
Exactly. It's about identifying potential vulnerabilities and building in redundancies so that we're not caught off guard by the unexpected.
This makes me think about the importance of having backup plans, emergency funds, and diversification in our investments.
That's right. It's all about mitigating the potential downside of black swan events, because even if we can't predict when or where they'll strike, we can certainly prepare for their impact.
Okay, so stress testing, backup plans, diversification. Are there any other key principles for managing risk in a world of black swans?
Another important concept is the idea of skin in the game. This means ensuring that those who make decisions also bear the consequences of those decisions.
So if you're going to make a risky bet, you should be willing to lose something if it goes wrong.
Exactly. This aligns incentives and helps to prevent reckless behavior.
It also makes me think about the importance of seeking out advice from people who have skin in the game, those who have actually experienced the consequences of their decisions, rather than just theorizing about them.
That's a great point, because experience, especially experience with failure, is often the best teacher when it comes to understanding and managing risk.
So skin in the game stress testing and embracing a more nuanced understanding of randomness. Are there any other key takeaways from Taleb's work that we should keep in mind?
One more that I think is particularly relevant is his emphasis on the importance of via negativa. This is a Latin phrase that means by way of negation.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that term. Can you explain it a bit further?
Essentially, it means that we often learn more from subtracting things than from adding them. In the context of risk management, this means focusing on what we should avoid rather than what we should do.
So it's about identifying potential risks and vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And then taking steps to mitigate them.
Exactly. It's a more cautious and conservative approach than trying to predict and control the future.
This makes me think about the importance of avoiding unnecessary risks, simplifying our systems, and focusing on building robustness rather than complexity.
That's right. It's about recognizing that the more complex a system is, the more potential points of failure it has, and the more we try to control and predict the future, the more likely we are to be blindsided by the unexpected.
This all ties back to the idea of embracing simplicity and acknowledging the limits of our knowledge.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that in a world of black swans, sometimes the best strategy is to do less, not more.
This has been an incredibly thought-provoking discussion, and I feel like we've just scratched the surface of the Black Swan, but I think we've covered some of the key concepts and takeaways that can help us navigate a world that is increasingly unpredictable and complex. Any final thoughts you want to share before we wrap up this deep dive?
One thing I always come back to is Taleb's emphasis on embracing uncertainty, not as a threat, but as an opportunity. It's a mindset shift that can be challenging, but ultimately liberating.
Because it allows us to let go of the illusion of control and embrace the adventure of living in a world where anything is possible.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that the future is inherently unknowable and that the most exciting discoveries and opportunities often lie outside our carefully laid plans.
So instead of trying to predict and control the future, we should focus on building resilience, adaptability, and a willingness to embrace the unknown.
That's the essence of Taleb's message. It's about recognizing that black swans are an inevitable part of life, and that by embracing them, we can not only survive, but thrive.
Will said. I think that's a perfect note to end on. So after this deep dive into the Black Swan, what are some of the key takeaways that you hope listeners will ponder? What's that one provocative thought you want to leave them with?
What I find most compelling about Taleb's work is his insistence that we move away from the Platonic, the idealized models and abstract theories, and embrace the aplatonic, the messy, unpredictable realities of the world we actually inhabit.
It's about recognizing that the map is not the territory, and that our attempts to impose order and predictability on a fundamentally chaotic universe are often futile and sometimes dangerous.
Precisely. We need to develop a healthy skepticism towards grand narratives, simplistic models, and those who claim to have a crystal ball.
It's about embracing uncertainty not as a threat, but as an inherent part of life, and learning to navigate a world where black swans are not just possible, but inevitable.
And perhaps most importantly, it's about recognizing that our inability to predict the future doesn't mean we're powerless.
We can still make choices, take actions, and build systems that are robust and adaptable, even in the face of the unknown.
It's a powerful message that challenges our conventional ways of thinking and opens up a world of possibilities.
And on that note, we wrap up our deep dive into Nassim Nicholas Taleb's The Black Swan. It's a book that will stay with you long after you finish reading it, challenging your assumptions and making you see the world in a whole new light. We hope this deep dive has provided you with a shortcut to understanding the book's key concepts and sparked some thought-provoking conversations along the way. As always, we encourage you to read the book for yourself and draw your own conclusions. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep embracing the unexpected. This is Books and Bytes signing off.
So after this deep dive into the Black Swan, what are some of the key takeaways that you hope listeners will ponder? What's that one provocative thought you want to leave them with? You know what I find most compelling about Taleb's work is his insistence that we move away from the Platonic, the idealized models and abstract theories, and embrace the aplatonic, the messy, unpredictable realities of the world we actually inhabit.
It's about recognizing that the map is not the territory, right? And that our attempts to impose order and predictability on a fundamentally chaotic universe are often futile and sometimes even dangerous.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We need to develop a healthy skepticism towards those grand narratives, simplistic models, and those who claim to have a crystal ball.
It's about embracing uncertainty not as a threat, but as an inherent part of life, and learning to navigate a world where black swans are not just possible, but inevitable.
And perhaps most importantly, recognizing that our inability to predict the future doesn't mean we're powerless.
We can still make choices, take actions, and build systems that are robust and adaptable, even in the face of the unknown.
It's a powerful message that challenges our conventional ways of thinking and opens up a world of possibilities.
And on that note, we wrap up our deep dive into Nassim Nicholas Taleb's The Black Swan. It's a book that will stay with you long after you finish reading it, challenging your assumptions and making you see the world in a whole new light. We hope this deep dive has provided you with a shortcut to understanding the book's key concepts and spark some thought-provoking conversations along the way. As always, we encourage you to read the book for yourself and draw your own conclusions. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep embracing the unexpected. This is Books and Bytes signing off.